Okay, so we are live on Facebook. We're recording for YouTube. Hello, Andrea. Hello, Amy.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here.
How are you both?
Fantastic.
Excellent.
So great. Thanks for having us, Julie.
So great. Welcome to Virtual Warwicks. Wish you were both here in San Diego. We were just in the green room talking, finding out that they are both. Well, Andrea's born and raised San Diegan, and Amy is native Southern Californian. So wish you were both here in person, but
we have that Southern California accent. Yes.
Right, yeah.
That's
but we
right.
will take you virtually. So glad that you are both here. So you both are now though in North Carolina. Is that correct?
Correct. That's right.
Yeah.
That's
so
right.
Hopefully we have we've got both the coasts covered. And so maybe there's some people joining us in between those coasts. We've got pretty much at one end, and I always say San Diego's at the very tip of the end of the continent over here. So
So Julie, should we pretend like we're looking around the bookstore and going, oh, I love what you've done over here.
that feature wall is fantastic.
Oh, look, make some noise over here. And
exactly. Yeah, that's the whole virtual world, right?
Yes.
It's great. It's very fun. Okay, so just real quick, don't want to waste too much of people's time, but let me just real quickly tell people what's going to happen tonight and a little bit about Warwick. So if you're not familiar with Warwicks, my little sign there says 1896. We are celebrating our 125th anniversary this year. So yeah, we're not the oldest bookstore in the country. We're the oldest continuously family owned. So Nancy Warwick's our fourth generation owner. So we have lots of things to celebrate. We've seen a lot of things in those 125 years. If people are watching this, they get tired of me saying it, but we've seen 2 pandemics, couple of world wars. I mean, lots of things have happened in those. Yeah, lots of stuff. So with that, so we're located in La Jolla, San Diego, California. So today, Andrea and Amy are going to talk for about 35-ish minutes, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. So in the chat, a couple things that are going to go on in the comment section of Facebook. One is I'm going to put in there the link to purchase Andrea's book, Make Some Noise. As you see right behind Amy there, that great stack. And also Andrea's got a stack there. So the link is super easy. Click on that. I always like to say any way there is to get a book, you can get it from Warwick's or your independent bookstore. We do ship out books to people, believe it or not. But if you're in the San Diego area, we'd love for you to stop by the store. So when you click that link, you have an option of either saying, I want to pick it up at the store or ship it to me. So that's super simple. And then for questions, we always love audience questions and audience participation. We'll get to as many of those as we can when they open it up for Q&A. Just go ahead and pop those. I'll be talking to you in the comment section too, but go ahead and pop those into that. And if people probably aren't hearing this, but I will also let people know that we are recording so that if they have to step away, they can come back and watch the rest of the conversation. So with that, I'm going to introduce you two lovely ladies, and then I'm going to go away for a while. So Andrea Owen is an author, mentor, and certified life coach who helps high-achieving women let go of perfectionism, control, and isolation and choose courage and confidence instead. Andrea lives in Stokesdale, North Carolina, when she's not writing, coaching her clients, speaking on stages, or on her Peloton bike. I love that. You can find her hanging out with her patient husband, Jason, and her 2 school-age children, Colton and Sydney. I'm sure this year was an interesting year for you with a couple of kids at home.
Absolutely. Yeah, as it was for a lot of people.
Yeah, lots of us. Not me. I say us. I don't mean that. I mean watchers. Mine are 28 and 30. My goodness sakes. Andrea's here today to talk about her new book, Make Some Noise, Speak Your Mind, and Own Your Strength. With her today is Amy E. Smith. Amy is a certified and credentialed life coach and hypnotherapist, masterful speaker, and personal empowerment expert. Founder of the Joy Junkie, I love that.com. I think that's the best name ever. Amy uses her roles as coach, writer, podcaster, and speaker to move individuals to a place of radical personal empowerment and self-worth. With acute focus on helping people, quote, find their voice, she is highly sought after for her uncommon style of irreverence, wisdom, and humor, and has been a featured expert in Inspired Coach magazine and right here on Fox 5 San Diego. So with that, ladies, have a great conversation. We'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks, Julie. We will miss you. I'm so excited to connect with you, Andrea.
I
We have so
know
much to celebrate.
my favorite MC is here. And before we jump in, just can you remind me, we're going to do a book giveaway. And I
Yes.
forgot to tell Julie, this is news to you. I know you're listening. I'm giving away a personalized signed copy of Make Some Noise. And we're just going to randomly pick a winner from the comments on the Warwick's page at the very end. So stay tuned.
Yes. And that's actually a really good thing to know, that we will be taking all questions from the Warwick's Facebook page. So if you're happening to watch this on one of Andrea's pages, just know that in order to submit questions to us, which we're going to be covering off towards the second part of our time together, be sure that you are on the Warwick's Facebook page. So, all right, so let's talk about Making Some Noise, Andrea. What was the easiest thing about writing this book, and what was the most challenging?
I would say the most challenging, I'm going to start with that because humans have a negativity bias. I didn't mean to do that. But the hardest thing was that it was COVID. So I signed my contract. I had lunch with my editor in Manhattan on, I think it was March 8th, 2020. And as we all know, that was like the last weekend before the bottom totally fell out. And, I was walking outside of the Penguin Random House offices, and we were headed to lunch, and you could feel sort of the tension. And, she and I were talking about, like, we don't know what's going on. And so we were super worried. And then, I got home and had signed my contract and needed to write a manuscript. And it was scary. I mean, none of us knew what was happening. None of us had lived through a global pandemic. I think very few people who were very old might have lived through it, but it was not easy, especially those first couple of months. I really had to compartmentalize when I was sitting down to write. And it was challenging. It was really, really challenging. However, when I wrote my last book, How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, my dad died like in the middle of that. Right. So I'd been through challenges when writing books before, but the easiest thing about writing this book was that it had been brewing for years. It had been sort of tapping me on the shoulder. I had talked to you about it. It had a different title back then, but I had really understood sort of in my bones, and my instincts were telling me that I can't talk about women's empowerment anymore without talking about this sort of elephant in the room, if you will, about the culture that raised us. So that's probably the hardest and easiest thing about writing this book.
Yeah, I remember having conversations with you about this and watching sort of the evolution of learning more about our societal influences. And it really kind of got to a fever pitch where it's like, I just can't keep talking about, like, just speak kindly to yourself or just know your values without really addressing this much, much bigger issue. Mm-hmm. So what will people walk away with when they read this book? Because I know it's broken into like two major sections, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, let me run down the table of contents for people who might be new to it. And also, like, how beautiful is the inside of this book? I think they did a really fantastic job with the design.
They really did.
I might be a little bit biased. So the first part is, it's called Shit to Start Doing. Sorry, not sorry if people are offended by language.
Yeah.
Chapter 1. Chapter 1, start taking up some damn space. Chapter 2, start shining too bright. Chapter 3, start asking for everything you want. Chapter 4, start accepting challenges as life invitations. 5, start getting your money shit together. 6, start remembering your built-in wisdom. 7, start building superior stories. Chapter 8, start writing it out and practicing resilience. So that's the entire first half of the book. And then the second part is Shit to Stop Doing. Chapter 9, stop allowing the brainwashing to make you small. 10 is stop waiting for confidence to smack you in the face. 11 is stop checking out of your life. Chapter 12 is stop complaining if you plan on doing nothing about it. Chapter 13, stop pointing the middle finger at your parents. Chapter 14, stop acting like a lonely only. And chapter 15, stop making your pleasure optional. And so I think what I want people to walk away with is personal development, also with a side of compassion and acknowledging nuance, because that was another thing that I really wanted to make clear in this book, that personal development, I mean, you always say this, like they call it personal development because it's personal, like it looks different for everyone. Everyone's
Right.
circumstances are different. People start at all different places. You have different family of origin stories. You may or may not have, egregious trauma. So I wanted to acknowledge all of that in this book. And that being said, that aside, one of the things that I want people, the main thing I want people to walk away with isn't so much tools and strategies to live a better life. That's fantastic. Like if you get that, good, because there's a lot of them in this book. But mostly I want people to get really curious about their conditioning.
Yes.
And I open the book by asking the question, what is your conditioning versus what is your truth? And like, if people take nothing else than just that question, then I'm happy, because it's allowing the reader to get just curious and more self-aware. And that will lead to your evolution. You've gone through your own, like, questioning your conditioning around your upbringing, like we both have. And I think it's one of those things that's so important because everybody's life is so nuanced.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up conditioning and then also the chapter around stop blaming your parents.
Stop pointing the middle finger at your parents. Yeah.
So one of our good friends and colleagues, Kara Stabin, always says you get to blame your parents until you're 30, and then you have to start reckoning with your shit. Then you have to really start looking at
that. I
that.
think 30 is generous.
I agree.
I think totally 25, 26, then time's up.
Well, I'm not doing so well because I'm 42 and I still have some shit that I'm pissed about. But I think this is really crucial. In fact, you and I were just talking about this the other day, how some work that we had done together, gosh, it was probably maybe 2013-ish. And we had done some YouTube videos and people were making kind of like sexist comments because, it's like the bottom of the barrel in the YouTube comments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I didn't have nearly as visceral a reaction that you did. You were so much more offended. And we were just discussing it this past weekend that I feel like because I grew up with so much overbearing religious dogma and purity culture, that for me, stepping into my sexuality and acknowledging, my femininity and allowing pleasure, which I know is something else that you talk about with Make Some Noise. That was huge for me to just go, okay, I'm allowed to enjoy my sexuality. And now that has evolved more so now, examining more and more of that conditioning, recognizing, okay, yes, and misogyny is totally present, and there are ways to speak up for yourself. There are ways to advocate for women. It's not a either or, it's a yes and.
100%. Like you can embrace your sexuality because, you weren't conditioned to do that. You can do that in a healthy way, but that doesn't mean that you have to accept sexual harassment in the process.
That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, it's a interesting thing that we both deal with a lot with personal development, that so many people want a linear rule. This is how you do it. So I love that the whole premise, the whole sort of place you want people to look is examining their own conditioning, because it's not linear and it's not you use this tool every single time. I oftentimes will say it's a different answer in each situation.
Yeah.
We don't always have that. Something else that you talk about a lot, I know, is confidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this thing that we see all the time where people think, as soon as I'm confident, then I'll start the business, then I'll get back in the dating scene, then I'll, fill in the blank. But that's not how confidence is built. Say a little bit more about that.
Unfortunately, no.
Right?
If we could bottle it up and sell it, well, Big Pharma probably would have gotten a hold of it by now and sold it and put some like fancy name on it. But confidence is built through actions and experiences. It's also built through competence and mastery of certain skills. So instead of waiting for confidence, I'm asking people to like, all you need is there's like a platitude or like a Pinterest quote, like all you need, I think it was from a Matt Damon movie, like all you need is like 20 seconds of courage or something, of insane courage or something to go for it. And I love that because it's true. Like all you need is a little bit of courage and sometimes preparation. If you're going in to have a hard conversation, if you're going in to have to ask for a raise with your boss and negotiate salary, like sure, you're going to need to be prepared, but you just need to muster up a little bit of courage. And then from that experience is where you gain the self-confidence. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Like I'm not saying just jump and the net will appear. Sometimes it doesn't. And you fall on your face and you get your ass kicked.
That's right.
So then it's the resilience conversation, but it's those experiences that make you understand like, okay, I'm not going to die. Hopefully it just makes you stronger for it and more understanding of the experience.
Yes, I absolutely love that. I oftentimes will say, you can't have courage unless you have fear. So get really excited if you're scared, because now this is your opportunity for courage. And it's interesting when you look at people who we would often ascribe success to, like Maya Angelou, Michelle Obama, Tina Fey. They've all talked about struggling with imposter syndrome. And I think about, okay, what's the difference between somebody like that who actually accomplishes the things that they want in their life, that they get to this place of confidence? It's because they were scared and chose courage over and over and over and over again. So it's not this magic pill. It's like, it's you getting into action all of these times, over and over again, even if you do fall down.
Yeah, I'm super curious too, if people want to, just even drop an emoji in the comments, like, let's do this webinar style. Like,
right.
Tell us in the comments.
Yeah. Give us like a little thumbs up.
Give us a thumbs up, or I always like to see people's favorite emoji. Just if you resonate with that, just because I've definitely been in that place where I've procrastinated on things or not done things at all. Like I have a keynote where I tell a story of when I quit tennis when I was 14. I had played since I was 3 years old and had never been on like an actual like team. And I was about to start high school where they had a tennis team, and I went to, my dad dropped me off to go try out for the girls' freshman tennis team. And I called him 10 minutes later to come pick me up. I was too afraid to go in there because I was afraid I would lose in front of the entire team. I was afraid I would let down my doubles partner or whatever. I was making up all these scenarios. I did not have the courage that it took. I thought that I had to have self-confidence to join the team. And I wish that it was one of like the biggest regrets of my life. And it might sound silly and trite, but if anyone is listening who's ever played a sport since they were young, or, played an instrument, like it becomes part of your identity. It truly does. And I will never forget that moment of just quitting. I quit because of a lack of self-confidence. And I don't want people to do that. I don't want people to think that they have to find this, self-confidence. It's not a tangible thing. It's something that we learn over time. So
that's right. A lot of times I'll describe it as almost like when a headache goes away, where you've been dealing with this pain for so long, where you've been talking shit to yourself, or you've been feeling like you can't do it, but you've been choosing courage over and over and over again. And then magically it becomes natural, and you just spoke up for yourself in a meeting, or you said what you needed with your partner, and you kind of go, oh shit, my head doesn't hurt anymore. It's that, we don't know the minute our head stops hurting, right? Like we just go,
you just notice that it's not there anymore.
But it takes something else to trigger that, where, we're doing a workout and we go, oh, my head's not hurting right now. And that's sort of how confidence is. That's how a lot of personal development is, I think, where it just kind of goes, oh, I behaved differently in that instant. But something that I think is such a great dovetail with this whole tennis story is the concept of resilience, because it may have taken you a couple of decades, but you did get back to tennis.
It took me 3 decades.
Yeah. And so before we jump into resilience, remind everybody, if you're watching, Julie from Warwick's bookstore is collecting any questions that you might have. So if there's things that are coming up for you as we're discussing this, please make sure, first of all, that you're on Warwick's page. If you're not, go over to their page and then drop any questions that you have in the comment section, because we're going to have a nice, robust time where we can answer those for you. And Andrea's kind of a big deal. So let's take fucking advantage of it. Like, if you can get some personalized support, ask us your questions right now.
Can you see that?
I mean, she even has the nameplate. So
On my
it's official.
desk.
It's official, everybody. Okay. So resilience. I know this is another
Mhm.
one of the things that you speak about a lot. There's a chapter in the book about it. Talk to me, because this is something that I don't talk about ever. How do you define resilience? How do you know when it's being called for? Just tell me about it.
I'm going to turn to that particular chapter because I ask over 250 questions in this book. Did I tell you that?
You did, and I think you created a free workbook specifically because of that, right?
There's a free workbook. I stopped counting at 250. So people can go to andreaowen.com/noise and grab it. All they need is a copy of the book. But the reason I'm turning to the chapter is because I get confused on which tools, because a lot of them are interchangeable. They can be used if you're trying to build resilience. They can be used if you're trying to, stop people pleasing and things like that. And I'm like, which one did I talk about? So I don't want to get it wrong. To answer your question, defining resilience for me is just the ability. It's two things. It's the ability to sort of persevere. I sort of lump them together, as well as, and that brings you to build resilience. Because when we're talking about persevering, it's usually when we're going through something challenging, right? Like it's like, making your way through COVID, or getting through a really difficult quarter if you're a business owner and clients have kind of have dried up temporarily. So that's that's the perseverance, and then the resilience comes on the other side of that, of just bouncing back. And also, it's not just like the act of bouncing back, like coming back to work or whatever it is. It's also like what's going on in your head, because we work in personal development. We talk about the inner stuff too. So one of the tools I talk about for resilience is perspective, which is something, that's life coaching 101, right? Is just recognizing what is the perspective that you might be stuck in. And I want to caveat this by saying, I tell a story a lot of how I was married before I had an incredibly traumatic divorce. And like, there was a decent amount of time where I wanted everyone to feel sorry for me. Mm-hmm. I wanted like everyone on team Andrea. And I sort of relished in that victimhood, and it worked for a little while until it didn't anymore. And so my perspective was victimhood. I felt wronged. I felt humiliated. I felt like it was all his fault. And then that got a little old. It's a really disempowering place to be. Yeah. And I felt like I was, kind of giving all my control away, but I'm not here to tell you that that's the wrong place to be. Right. You're going to go through whatever you're going to go through. I am not going to sit here and tell you like, don't ever be in that place. Or if you're in that place, it's like, cut it off. Like your journey is your journey. And when you're ready, or maybe you might not totally be ready, but consider changing your perspective. Like, do you want to be, using that same example, do you want to be more of like the Phoenix rising? Do you want to be more of an empowered person? Do you want to be stronger for having gone through your divorce or whatever the challenging circumstances? So that's one kind of, I don't want to say it's easy, because for some people it's not easy, but it's maybe an easy thing to remember if you're needing to, brush up on your resilience.
Do you ever find, because there are things that I don't know if it's a direct correlation to quitting things and like giving up. I think about resilience in other situations, like it being turned down for a job over and over and over again. And I've had this conversation with I think with you too, about when it's really powerful to actually quit.
Yeah.
And so that could actually be resilience looking different, right? Like maybe it's not getting up and going after the same thing over and over again, but resilience might look like a pivot.
Totally. And I think, like, it's unfair to put like a blanket piece of advice on that. It depends. It's totally depends on what the situation is. And, for instance, my kids, they're in 8th grade and 6th grade, and now they're in middle school. They're both middle school. And so we are asking them to pick a sport. It can be any sport. It doesn't even need to be something that's offered at school, but they have to do something and they have to stick it out for the season. And, unless they get injured or something, like we're not monsters, but something like that is something that my husband and I discussed at length. Like, is this something that we want to do? My parents let me quit tennis. I wish they would not have let me quit. I wish they would have just said, go. And if it's terrible, you can quit, because it wouldn't have been terrible. It would have been fine. So I think it depends. And that's a bigger conversation, like the quitting conversation. Cause sometimes it's best to quit. You got to know when to hold them. Know when to fold them.
Oh my gosh. All right. So this is one of my favorite topics. The first 2 chapters are all about taking up space and what you call shining too bright. I get worked up about this one. I think
Which one? Both of them, or one?
Just this whole concept, because if you have been labeled as too anything, TOO, anything, the implication is that you are wrong, that you are damaged. If you're too emotional, too this, too bright. So I know this book is so much about women genuinely owning their power, letting go of that old messaging and conditioning. Because let's be honest, there are a lot of idioms out there to tell us to just shut the fuck up and be quiet. Like, don't rock the boat, don't open up a can of worms, you better sweep it under the rug. Like, we have all these ways to say, why don't, dull your shine. Let's not be too bright. Take it away. Tell us about why we need to let go of that.
Well, this book, I want to again preface it by saying that it's not, I wish it were as easy as us just, being cheerleaders in this industry and saying, make some noise, take up space, shine bright, which, a lot of my earlier work was like that. And which I think definitely has its place. I think there are some people who are inspired and motivated by that. And it also can sort of like roam into what's known as toxic positivity in our industry, which does not allow, toxic positivity doesn't allow room for nuance. It's also spiritual bypassing, which is another conversation for another time. But in this book, I wanted to also talk about the reasons that why we typically don't shine bright, and because there's real risks. There's real risks.
That's
and
right.
You and I come to this conversation from a place of immense privilege, and for women to speak up, whether it's their opinion, whether it's something sexist happening at work, depending on their race, their class, their ability, their sexual orientation, there are implications, like you said, for some women to speak up. So I don't want to say that it's easy and it's your fault, women out there, if you're not making more money, if you're not, getting everything that you need. So that being said, and then I also don't want to say like, oh my God, it's so hard for us. Like, we're so oppressed.
Right.
Like, there are real things going on in the world. And so the book is all about how do we simultaneously live in a culture that brings us up to be fundamentally insecure, and at the same time push back against it and show up in our lives. So that's really like the whole messaging of the book. And so your question about, these opening 2 chapters about taking up space and shining too bright, taking up space, like what that looks like is you can take up space with your body, and you can take up space with your voice, that is, giving an opinion, asking for what you want, speaking up for yourself, setting a boundary. Taking up space with your body might look like demanding the armrest on an airplane, or body acceptance, wear that bikini, wear, purple hair, or this amazing wig that you want to, your own self-expression. And when we're talking about shining too bright, the reason that I'd called that chapter Shine Too Bright instead of just Shine Bright is because if anyone's read the book The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, and you can get it at Warwick's, it's one of the very few big books I have both in audiobook and in print. And he talks about how most people have this fundamental fear of outshining others. And the example that he gives in the book is good, but it's sort of like a straw man example. And I thought about it with women, and I thought this is unique for women because we are brought up, we have this conditioning and programming that tells us we are to put everyone else before us, be accommodating, definitely don't make people uncomfortable with anything, with your ambition, with your intelligence, with your voice, with anything. And so but boys, on the other hand, are brought up where it's encouraged for them to be, more assertive and aggressive, et cetera. So I think that we have a unique challenge in that way. And that's why I called the chapter Shine Too Bright, because it speaks to that fear that many of us have of, if I grow to my all of my accomplishments that I want, then I will outshine. Maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's a parent. For many of us, it's our spouse, especially as women, making more money than our husbands if we're in a heterosexual relationship. And that can drive us to play small. And sometimes we don't even know this is happening. I mean, this is happening unconsciously behind the scenes, and we don't even know. So that's really the gist of that whole chapter.
I love that. And I really encourage you all, if you have not gotten this book and you are not banking on winning the raffle, the giveaway, please check out the link that Julie has put into the comments on the Warwick's Facebook page. Make sure that's where you are right now in the Facebook world. Julie, who is running the show behind the scenes, definitely has the link for you. It's incredible. And it's also a really beautiful thing to support a independent bookstore. Okay.
Yay.
Now more than ever, really, really important. So we're going to cover off about one other question here, and then we're going to jump into some Q&A. So if you've been listening and you're going, yeah, but what about this? Or I struggle with this, or confidence or resilience, or any of the things that we've brought up, we would love to hear from you. Take advantage of this time. So throw your questions into the comment section. Julie is going to be sending that over to us. So dovetailing a little bit on the Shining Bright, you say that women's empowerment begins with women asking for what they want, period. Now, I think this also warrants the caveat that you were talking about before. And this is something that I've started discussing much more frequently in my work, that sometimes asking for what you want isn't safe, depending on any marginalized community that you or identity that you might be a part of. So whenever we talk about that stuff, I want number one thing is always your personal safety first. So if demanding what you want or asking for what you want is going to influence your own personal safety, this may not be the tool to use at that specific time. So I hope that that's clear.
Yeah. Thank you.
But I do think that there is a very common narrative that happens in most women's minds where I like to call it the cognitive override, where we override what we want or what we're desiring. And we go, oh, I'm probably being too needy. I'm probably asking for too much. Which, by the way, when did we ever make having needs being a bad thing? Like, of course, we're all fucking needy. We have needs. God damn it. Right? So what are your thoughts on that? So that I don't go off.
Yeah, you and I are definitely on the same page there. And it's really interesting. And I've just recently done some research about, I made a TikTok about it recently, yesterday, I think, that it's fascinating how historically, if we're talking about heterosexual relationships, historically, women were dependent on men economically, for, food and shelter. And women were the ones who were the compassionate ones, the ones who gave comfort, who upheld the relationship, who raised the children, and, just all around, like, took care of operations around the house. And these are old, antiquated stereotypes and gender roles that we needed to have back then. And now it's 2021, and we have changed quite a bit. Women are much more independent now, but our thinking for many people has not changed, even if it's unconscious. Even if, you could be the most progressive man or woman, and you might still, even my husband. So my husband left his job last year to be the stay-at-home parent. And we had to have some hard conversations about gender roles and what that actually means. And I'm getting totally off track here.
That's okay.
But and I'll kind of segue back into the conversation from that example. But I have found myself even not wanting to have conversations with him, and continuing to take on tasks around the house, even though I'm the one that works full time. And we have an agreement, he and I have an agreement that, he would take over all the household tasks with our kids. And it's a lot to do. If anyone's ran a house with children, there's a lot to do. And I have found myself just continuing to do certain tasks because I don't want to bother him. And I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. And like, this is my old conditioning and not wanting to ask for what I want because I don't want to be seen as needy. I do shame work also. I'm trained and certified in the work of Dr. Brene Brown. And one of the most powerful exercises that I do as a facilitator of that work is I help people understand what more or less what their triggers are. And for women, our shame triggers tend to be around our body and appearance. And also, we don't want to be seen as needy. That's super common. And I find it happening in my own life. And, sometimes, Amy, you're my best friend. Like, sometimes there's still stuff that'll happen. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to say anything. It's not that big of a deal, because it's again, like, this is, I don't know the science on this, but like, it feels like it's embedded in our DNA almost, like, and I've looked at research, like how much of this is nature and how much of it is nurture. What the science that I've seen has told us that very small amount of it is actually nature, and the majority of it is nurture. And so when we are thinking about asking for what we want, it's not just as simple as gathering up the tools on how to have the conversation. Yes, you need those. And at the same time, like if you're having this trauma response, that's something to talk to your therapist about. That's something to unpack, because it's going to get, once you start to unpack that, it's going to get easier to have those conversations. And you deserve to not have a trauma response when you're asking for what you want. Like your needs are important and they matter. Like whether the person is reciprocal or not, you're allowed to ask for what you want. Right. Period.
That's right. That's right. And there's a way to acknowledge what that trauma response looks like, which for many people, it's extremely physical. It's like racing heart, it's sweaty palms, you're in your fight, flight, freeze response, right? Where you're like, I might not survive this conversation. Now, if that's what's going on for you, then it's so very much encouraged to please seek out very specific trauma therapy. In fact, somebody has requested or submitted a question related to that. So we can actually jump into some Q&A from our lovely audience, if you would like. Let's see. So let me find that specific one, because I think that would be really helpful.
I think Julie's dropping him in the chat to us on Zoom.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So she said, this is from a lovely woman named Christina Lynn, who we know exactly who you are. Hello, beauty. She says, I'm starting to really dig into my conditioning and realize I've never been able to truly make noise in my life. I was always shut down, and that is changing now, all caps. Do you have any recommendations of what kind of therapy would help me with childhood conditioning issues?
Yes. Hi, Christina. I like asking for referrals when it comes to therapists. because I like getting someone's account who actually saw the person. You can read psychologytoday.com. Is it .com or .org? I think it's .com. I'll have to find out.
I think it's .com.
You can search by your area and your specialty. And you know what I look for, Christina, is somebody that has experience, who has a decent amount of experience, and family systems, internal family systems, IFS, is more about you and not so much about your family, but it's directly related to your childhood upbringing. So you might want to look at somebody who's certified in IFS, who's certified in maybe some kind of somatic therapy, but any great therapist is going to help you unpack your conditioning. And also any great therapist is going to ask you what your goals are from the very first session. I don't necessarily recommend that somebody just like walk in and just start talking. Like map out with your therapist, like what do you want to start to dig into, you know, after X amount of sessions, what do you want to walk away with? And yeah, that's kind of the basics in therapy. I feel like is unpacking your childhood stuff. And good for you. It's not easy.
It is. It's not easy. In fact, you and I were just discussing how I am going to be actively searching for somebody who specializes in religious trauma and surviving all of that nonsense, since our entire country is founded on that. I digress. Okay. So from Kelly, she asks us, what's your best advice for dealing with people who are hard-headed and unwilling to listen to your needs? Ooh, that's a thick one.
That sounds like a boundary conversation. Can you, because I see you have another question, Kelly, would you mind typing in, if it's private, I totally understand, but can you give a little bit more context? And like, why don't we answer the other question that Kelly has about getting involved in the book club? Because that's more
so you have a handful of like awesome things surrounding this book. Obviously, this event is one of them. We would love for you to support Warwick's independent bookstore. So Julie has put the link into the comments. Be sure to check that out. But listen to us first. But you also have a book club happening. So how does one get involved in that?
So it starts on September 20th. I'm giving people a little while to actually get their book and read some chapters, and super easy, andreaowen.com/noise. And you can just look at the steps in there to join us. There's like a 60 something page workbook that's free, because again, I ask over 250 questions. And then the book club will be here on Facebook, and it's a pop-up group that we're going to have. And we're going through 4 chapters of the book, a chapter a week for a month. So andreaowen.com/noise. Thank you very much, Kelly. And if you could give us some more context for your other question, we'll be sure to circle back to it.
And that's September 20th. Right?
Correct. September 20th.
September 20th. So go to Warwick's, get the book before you jump into that, and andreaowen.com/noise to make sure that you can jump in. Okay. So another question from Sarah. She says, when you know that you need to speak up and make some noise, not just for yourself, but for others too, how do you know you're going about it in an effective way and not just making some noise and looking like a crazy emotional woman?
What a great question. So I would first start with, what are your values? And I talk about it at length in my second book, In How to Stop Feeling Like Shit. It's chapter 15. And if you've never done values work, there's so much information online too for free. You could start with asking yourself, what's important about the way you live your life? Like, how do you want to show up every day? And, you know, for me, my personal values, and they can change depending on the season of your life. And they also don't have to be things that you're honoring really fantastically right now. They can be, we call those aspired values. So mine is courage, trust, and responsibility. The reason that trust is in there is because, as Amy knows, trust is something that I have struggled with, have some abandonment issues. And it's something that, I want to have more of in my life. I want people to trust me. I want to trust other people because I know that that creates intimacy and connection with people. And so that's why that's one of my values right now. And it might change. Like I might just kind of have that on lockdown and end up pulling in something else as my core values. So that being said, I think that once you get clear on what your values are, then you can look at that particular situation. So when you think about what it is that you want to speak up about, for yourself and for other people, does that fall in line with your values? I'm going to take a wild guess and say that it does. And I'm going to also take a wild guess and say that if you're asking us this question, then it's important to you. And that this goes back to that question I asked, what is your conditioning versus what is your truth? Your conditioning probably tells you that if any woman speaks up, speaks loud and proud about her opinion, about what she thinks should change, about what she wants, then she's emotional and too loud and she's making noise just to be obnoxious. She's rocking the boat. She's making a scene. And your truth, I'm going to take a guess and say that that's important to you. That matches up with your values. It's change that you want to see in the world. And that's just my wild guess.
Yeah.
I have a hunch.
Yeah.
You can pop in the chat and tell me if I'm on track there, but yeah, I would look at your values first, and that'll usually point you in the direction that you need to be going in.
I love how she says, looking like the crazy emotional woman. So one of my absolute favorite things to do these days is every time I see a man on television just losing his shit, being upset, frustrated, I'm always like, God, men are so emotional. Jeez. So, but again, not to jump on this question, but this is very much my wheelhouse of how to express yourself in a way in which you can actually be heard. So the very short answer of that is to be very, very clear about what it is that you are requesting and what you're asking for from that person. Sometimes down to the most minute detail, but also it is your delivery. And so one of the questions I always like to pose to people is, if you were on the receiving end of you, how would you respond to you? Would you be like, let me hear more about that? Oh, okay, I can totally, or would you be like, this person's coming at me like a bat out of hell? And so what that ends up looking like is literally rehearsing, deciding what it is that you want to share with somebody and rehearsing it with the tone of voice, with your body language, because I will tell you what, most of the time when you first go into that conversation, it is fucking messy and we react off of emotion. So, and that's normal. That's not just women. That is all of us react off of emotion. So, and first step, get the book. So you can start working on some of this stuff. Okay. And this is also another great question we have from Diane. I know that you and I have gotten questions like this a ton of times with people who are just overwhelmed with the process of, oh my God, there's so much I need to work on. Okay, now I have to look at my conditioning. Now I have to look at my triggers. Now I have to look at my trauma responses. Now I have to look at, how do you decide where and how to start?
I always tell people to start with therapy. Like I'm a life coach. Like I do think that, you and I always say, Amy, that life coaching is for people who are, it is a very general statement, like are of sound mind. So that doesn't mean that, like sans mental illness or anything like that. But all the life coaching in the world isn't going to help you if you have, complex PTSD or trauma that is unresolved. You're just going to keep going in circles because you could use all of the tools that you have, and it's your nervous system that's actually on high alert and reacting unconsciously. So I always say, start with therapy. Everybody can use therapy. I got that question on social media a couple of weeks ago, and the person said, like, is it your opinion that all people need therapy? I said, absolutely, positively. I know that my children are going to be in therapy one day because of something that I tell them that I didn't mean it to be that way. And it doesn't matter because that's how they took it. And it just is the way it is. I also, going more on that, like if you feel that you have any addictions or even just poor coping mechanisms, that might be something that you talk to your therapist about, whether you find that you are drinking too much or, isolating and not reaching out, to your friends and things like that. Start there. And then once you kind of like come up to the surface, you're like, oh, okay. Like, I think you're feeling a little bit healthier and you feel like you've evolved a little bit. Like, then you can start talking about, going after like these big goals that you want. Not that you can't do that at the same time, but I don't want people to get sort of caught up in like, oh my God, where do I start? And should I be going after these big goals? Or why can't I reach my big goals when it might be a therapy issue? So that's my very long answer, Diane. And that's a really great question.
It is. And there is a danger if you haven't addressed some of these deep-rooted things and you try to layer personal development on top of it when you have a severe anxiety disorder or you're in the throes of depression or there's complex PTSD, like you were saying, and you start going, why don't these tools work for me? That's another reason why it's incredibly imperative that therapy as the beginning point, as the genesis, could be extremely helpful.
Yeah.
So
I always say that therapy and life coaching go very, very well together. A lot of my private clients are also in therapy, or they've been in therapy in the past.
Absolutely. Same. And a little note too, I looked it up. It is psychologytoday.com. They have an amazing search function, as Andrea mentioned. Great resource. So yeah, it is .com. We are going to be wrapping up here really soon, and we are going to be doing our giveaway. So before we do that, Kelly did get back to us. So let's just cover this really quickly and then we'll wrap up. We'll have Julie come back on and share some more Warwick brilliance. So Kelly says what she was referring to is employers who are set in their ways and unwilling to listen to suggestions for support for everybody. How do you deal with that type of response without being labeled in a negative way of making too much noise? What is the best way to make noise to benefit all?
Work. Oh, I think that and I can only say in this country because I live in the United States, but we have a leadership problem at work. If any of you follow Brene Brown's work, she wrote a really great book called Dare to Lead. You could get your employers that book for Christmas, be like, Secret Santa, here's a book on how to be a better leader. It's tricky. And I don't like to give work advice because it really depends on your industry. It depends on the relationship that you have with your boss and your coworkers, as well as human resources. So my advice typically is to go to HR and hopefully they can help you and explain to them what is going on. And like Amy was saying earlier, you have to assess your risk, because I would never want somebody to put themselves at risk for being let go because they spoke up about something that was a no-no or, broke a contract or something like that. So, I wish I had a better answer, Kelly. It's complicated. It's super complicated. Amy, do you have anything to add?
I absolutely agree, because when we're talking about work relationships, we're actually talking about livelihood. So if you are speaking up and making noise and rocking boats and all of those things, it could mean a detriment to your financial situation, right? So as it pertains to that, the thing that I have noticed can be an effective avenue is to bring it back to the bottom line, because so sadly, a lot of people don't care as much unless they can see the quantifiable data of how that's affecting company morale, which then informs productivity, which then informs the bottom line. So if there's, instead of coming from your emotional place, which again is valid and valuable, but when you're advocating for that, the more calm you are, the more poised you are, the more factual you are, the more data driven you are about the bottom line of the organization and how you are coming at it from I want us all to succeed. So again, kind of talking a little bit about perspective that we were discussing at the very top of our time together. If you can have the perspective of, I'm advocating for us at large so that we can all be successful, that's a very different come from than I don't like so-and-so in this and they're doing this and blah, 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 blah. So it's a strategy. Again, it's not the advice that I would give you in speaking up with your partner or in family dynamics and such. So, but I agree with you that it's tricky because there's lots of components that happen in those situations.
And thank you for circling back and giving us some more information on that.
Yes.
I think we have one more question, right?
We did. Let's see. From Rachel, she says, do you have any recommendations for finding or boosting low motivation? Because hello,
COVID.
pandemic.
Yes, I do. First and foremost, rule out, wait, what was that? Zoom is being,
COVID.
Oh, okay. Ew, COVID. Yeah. Rachel, first, I would rule out that it's some kind of physiological thing going on. So I was very much in your shoes last year, went to the doctor, found out I had very low vitamin D and borderline hypothyroidism. So I am not a medical doctor. This is not medical advice, but go see your doctor, have some labs done, have, a physical, and just rule out anything on that end, because that could very much be it. Also, it could be something like depression or anxiety or something like that. So again, take care of yourself in that regard, mentally and physically. And then I'm going to circle back to, I know it's like super unsexy, but I'm going to talk to you about values again, because it's just one of those things where I think Amy and I are in agreement on this, that if I could just teach one tool that's the most important that everybody needs to sort of start with, it's like understanding what your values are and not just name them, but what do they look like in your life? And so I would start with that. And again, I mean, that's something you can Google and find some tools. And Rachel, I would also ask yourself, sometimes it's not about asking what your goals are in terms of like, how much money do I want to make, or what hobbies excite me? What would motivate me? Ask yourself, like, what do you want to experience? And like, there's no wrong answer. Like, if you want to experience adventure, or maybe you're not that adventurous and maybe you just want to experience more rest in your life. And it's really about asking yourself what you need. And I can't remember, I think it's in chapter, gosh, there's 85,000 words in this book. I think it's in chapter 3, and start asking for everything that you want. I can't remember, but I go through this whole thing of finding out what it is that you want, because for many women, we don't know what we want because we always put ourselves last. We make everybody else a priority except ourselves. Or sometimes we try to make ourselves a priority. I tell the story in the book that I did that. And I was also making everybody else a priority too. So I was exhausted. So there's, all these circumstances that can make you not even be very clear on what it is that you want. So I take you through this whole exercise in there. And that's where I would start. What do you want to experience? And you can journal on that, and then start figuring out what is it that you want. And sometimes it's not just as easy as asking yourself the question. So again, I would go through what I have in the book.
And I would also add too, that we can't disregard the effects that this collective trauma has wielded on all of us. And there was an incredible article by Adam Grant about languishing, this term of languishing, and what is that. And it's this sort of middle malaise, not full-blown depression, but also not motivated at all. It's just sort of this in-between functioning, which is essentially a lack of motivation. And I've seen a lot of people over the last year and a half vote on themselves of, why am I not as productive? Why am I not working out as much as I want? Why am I not throwing myself into my business? And it's, we're all in a collective trauma. Now that's all varying degrees for everybody, of course, but our fear response is heightened. That shit drains your adrenals. And again, no medical advice coming from here, but I say that all to just give yourself a little dose of compassion. So if you're out there, those high achievers, those perfectionists, those type A's tend to have a really difficult time addressing rest. And so I would also just look there. Is there anything happening with just tending to self where you're trying to push and push and push, because obviously our society really values productivity, which is a masculine trait, right? So anyway, we could go on and on, but why don't we do a raffle? The giveaway.
Yeah.
The giveaway. I mean, it's kind of a raffle. It's a giveaway.
So I'm
It's
just
a
going to,
book.
I'm going to scroll. Let me go to the Warwick's page and look at the comments over there. And I will pick somebody. Please hold. And I don't know if Julie is going to come back. What's going to happen?
There she is.
There she is.
So while you're looking and you're scrolling through, Andrea, to pick a winner here, as I was thinking in the background, and I know you have your audience and everything, but all I could think of the whole time is both of you need to somehow get in front of college age women, because we need to start some of these conversations about courage, and that when these young women are away from us parents and that influence, and before some of these bad habits start really getting ingrained, it's like you both would be so awesome in that arena.
It's interesting. Like, this book is the first one that I've written over 4 different generations, Gen Z all the way to baby boomers. And I was super curious when I was asking my community, because I have all ages of women in my community. I was asking them, like, okay, Gen Z and younger millennials, like, tell me how this shows up for you in your life. And there was definitely, I did see more younger women, like, like college age women who were aware of the problems and were having the conversations, like, with their friends or maybe their moms, but they still really struggle with it. And so I always say, like, we have come a very long way socially and culturally, and we also still have a really long way to go. So thank you for the compliment, Julie. I appreciate it.
I really do, because it's just one of those things that I think that in that arena of when women that's their first dose of independence, really.
Mm-hmm.
and really shaping that, both of your voices would just be spot on in that arena.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
I just randomly, my eyes fell on a name to do the book giveaway. So Sarah Studeris, maybe it's Studeris. I'm going to ask you to please email us on how should we do this? Can she email the Warwick's page? She can
DM the Warwick's page with an address.
Because I don't want to send people in like too many different directions.
Right. So just please DM us on that page.
DM Julie on the Warwick's page, and I will send you a personalized signed copy of Make Some Noise.
Slide into Warwick's DMs.
There you go. I love it. I even know that term at my age, for goodness sakes.
Good job, Julie.
Excellent. A+.
Okay. Like you said, we could talk here for hours and hours. You both are amazing. Andrea, thank you so much for being here with us, and our audience appreciates this. And like I said, it's recorded, so everybody can go out and share it with their friends and everything. But Amy, for you, tell us, if people want to follow and find out more about what's going on in your world and what you do, where would you like to send people?
Sure. So my kind of corner of the internet is over at thejoyjunkie.com. Junkie is spelled Junkie. As far as social platforms, I'm everywhere under the handle at The Joy Junkie, but I hang out most often on Insta if you want to hang out there. But scoot over to my site. There's tons of free stuff. I've been doing a podcast for 8.5 years, and free hypnosis stuff, free ebooks, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of goodies. So that's where you can find me.
Excellent. And Andrea, for you, you've got a great website too. So is that where you pretty much direct people to?
Yeah, AndreaOwen.com, and all of those free bonuses that we were talking about are at AndreaOwen.com/noise. And I also have a podcast called Make Some Noise, so it's easy to remember. And I'm at Hey Andrea Owen on Instagram, and follow me on TikTok and come and say hi, because I love it on TikTok. It is my medium, and it's super fun.
Everybody's got their ones, you know what I mean? Everybody's got their ones. So I always like to ask that, because it's like we think that, oh, she must be on Instagram, but it's like, or wherever, or Twitter, whatever. But it's like, I love that you're doing TikTok. So
yeah, I'm on most of them.
Right.
Not
but it's where we're most at, but it's where we're most active. Yeah.
If you tweet me, I'll get back to you in like 2 months. So sorry.
Yeah,
exactly. It's kind of that cesspool sometimes, but
It's a little, it's as someone, with chronic anxiety, like it's just
Yeah.
a little too much for me. I get overstimulated.
Well, I know. And it's one of those that it becomes that rabbit hole where you just like, it's like a train wreck you can't look away from sometimes.
That's why I haven't been on in many years.
It's
Yeah.
like, it's crazy. Ladies, thank you. We're getting some great comments back in Facebook. Thank you all who were watching us tonight. And when we close this out, we're going to say goodbye. So all the best to you, Amy and Andrea, and good luck with the book. It's fantastic.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for being here and coming and spending time with us. I really appreciate it. Go out and make some noise.
Perfect. Good night, everybody.